Okay, the subject of drying and cooling. I'm Josef Barbi from, like Roger said, from Engineered Systems and Equipment, part of the Midland Industrial Group, or now Midland ADN Group. We are at the US Pavilion. We've been in this business of building feed mills for about 45 years, and myself about 55 years. In every continent, I think I built 380 mills around the world. In the last 30 years, mainly shrimp feed, 22 in Ecuador. My wife is from Ecuador. Fish feeds, pet foods, and so on. And we could talk about the whole process, and I see there's nobody talking about extrusion and nobody talking about a lot of different, like Roger said, there's a lot of processes missing in the process flow diagram. But one important subject which I would like to talk about is drying and cooling. You know, I don't think many people knows what the difference is between drying and cooling. Yesterday a gentleman came and said, I need an extruder, but I already have a grinder, I already have a dryer. I said, okay, what dryer do you have? He said, oh, I make pellets, and you know, the pellets go into this machine and they come out dry. Well, that's not a dryer, that's a cooler, obviously. And there's a big difference. And one other thing which is important, I just came from Africa. We went at in Zambia, the African Aquaculture Convention, which I always go to everywhere in the world, and which was last week. And one of the big issues, I think, which people don't understand, what is your cost in the process of making aqua feeds or any extruded pet foods? Most people would think that your main cost is actually in the extruder, in the extrusion. And I'm not talking about cost of investment only. I'm talking about cost of processing, cost of production. And your main cost of production, of producing any kind of an extruded product, is in the dryer, which most people don't pay any attention to. And there's one law of physics, which is also difficult to understand, and that is you need so many kilocalories or BTU to evaporate 1 liter or 1 gallon of water. Law of physics, no change. Nobody can do that better. Nobody can change that. It doesn't matter who the manufacturer is of a dryer around the world. What you can change is what energy you use in order to dry. So what is the difference between drying and cooling? Obviously, drying you use because your moisture is inside, in grain, in feed, inside to the center. And the only way to get that moisture out of that center from the product is to heat it and evaporate that moisture. The gentleman just talked about how important it is on the moisture content. I think 14% actually. I normally try to get it to 12% moisture for storage, but I think 14 is about the maximum you want to go, as you can see why. So what is cooling? Well, in the pelleting process, we don't get the moisture. We condition the feed and then we pellet it, but it evaporates because we are putting steam into that conditioner, and I think you're going to hear about conditioning here in the next couple minutes. And so we are adding moisture from the steam because of gelatinizing the starches. So that moisture is not in the product. That moisture is a surface moisture, basically. And so what I'm doing in cooling is I have an airflow over the product, and that airflow basically takes away that evaporated moisture which I added from the steam. That's what cooling, very simple. You do that, there's many different types of coolers, many different types of dryers. Here it says 10 to 11%. This is a horizontal dryer, for instance, vertical dryer, fluidized bed, which we use now for microfeeds, because today we make microfeeds for fish feeds of 0.5 millimeter, 0.8, 0.1 millimeter, and obviously I cannot use bed type, horizontal type dryers for that. This is a horizontal dryer which basically has perforated trays, and normally the dryers were made for drying on the top and cooling on the bottom. So basically you have two passes, a drying and the cooling. I personally prefer to have a separate dryer and a separate cooler because especially lately people make fish feeds, but then they say, hey Joseph, can we also make pet food with that? Well, with a few little changes. And some of the changes are, in pet food, I have to absorb that oil, that coating, that liquid I put on the external of the extrudate of that pellet. And that's the best when you do it when that pellet is hot, because the pores are open and it disappears. And so I dry it, I coat it, and then I cool it. So that's the, well, this wouldn't go any further. I don't know why. Is there any reason why this? Maybe I did something wrong. Well, anyway, I got to stay in my 10 minutes, otherwise Roger is going to, doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that you all understand, and my point was, I mean, Roger gave me 10 minutes, and I give a lot of speeches around the world, and I like to talk for several hours about processing, but 10 minutes is, I just basically would like to make the point how important this is, the flow of drying, and the importance, of course, of drying also is, this is a horizontal bed dryer, and as you can see, the big problem of drying here on the edges, the product is much higher than it is in the center. Well, the air always goes to the least resistance. And the least resistance, where do you think is there? In the middle. And one of the things when you choose a dryer is, what is your variation in the moisture? In any kind of a dryer. It could be a grain dryer. That's really the number one, your variation. Because it could be quite a bit different. I mean, 2%, 3%. I've been to a fish feed plant in Alabama, and they called me because they got a big difference, big variation in their horizontal dryers. And one of the problems is precisely the level of the bed level inside. This is a carousel dryer. They say it got the least variation of moisture. It basically goes from one floor to the other one, and your maximum there is 0.5% of variation in moisture. So that's an important thing, especially when you go into the pet food industry. I'm sure you heard about drying pet food and how many big companies like Nestle had to actually retrieve their products from the shelves, from the store shelves, because of molding. Well, where does the molding come from? Because of poor drying. So drying, the same with the fish feed, the same with any kind of a product. I mean, poor drying and storing obviously is a big issue. Those are the, then you got vertical dryers, counterflow type dryers. They actually started out as coolers, which I'm sure, I see there's many people from Holland, and and Galen and so on. They were one of the first ones to manufacture those type of dryers. And when I was in the management of CPM, we made them together in the United States. So these are the type of discharges, which I also wanted to tell you. One of them is a sliding discharge, and the other one is a tipping or rotating, which I like better because it less breakage. These are counterflow dryers again. This is the fluidized bed dryer, which we use a lot for very small products. Anything which can be airborne can be dried with this. It's floating in hot air. You can control the heat and you can control there's a jet flow there. So basically these are counterflow coolers, which are very common in the industry. Those are round counterflow coolers, and that's about it. So we are at Hall 7 at the US Pavilion, and at F50, I think, but it's right on the corner of the main. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to speak to you later if you need more information.